Welcome to this evening's special program. We are honoured to have amongst us numerous members of three very special agencies, and they are the Fairfax Fire Department, Fairfax Police, and members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. Just by way of introduction, I just want to say a few words. The Turkish American community are proud and productive members of the American society. They are busy through organizations like ATFA, who is hosting us today, through the Rumi Forum, through the IATS, and numerous other organizations playing a very important role in the process of integration through educational and information activities, overcoming misunderstanding and prejudice, and through projects of engagement and dialogue. Shared values of democracy and freedom of speech and the opportunity to succeed are important to all Americans. Part of remembering 9/11, 10 years on, is respecting these shared values and how they are dear to each and every one of us. In this light, Turkish Americans are working hard to contribute to a diverse and multicultural society and always encouraging social harmony, all within the framework of these shared values. So, in remembering 9/11 and showing our appreciation for the heroes that played such an important role, we have with us tonight the heads of these three agencies. I would like to call upon them one by one, and I will present from here. If I may do so, by first inviting Chief David Raw of the Fairfax Fire Department. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting myself and my colleagues here. I've had the privilege of being the fire chief in the city of Fairfax for about a year and a half now. And I would tell you that AFTA is the first group that reached out to me and came visit me with a very nice basket that we shared that afternoon. So I want to thank you for that, and I certainly will always remember that. When Jenna called me about coming here and sent us an email, an invitation about coming, she asked that I talk about heroes and stories of our personnel. Well, the dictionary defines a hero as a person of distinguished courage and ability, admired for his brave deeds and noble qualities. And I'm fairly certain that none of our men or women really consider themselves heroes in this sense. However, I would tell you that most public safety officials here and everywhere would tell you they were just doing their job in many cases. And in most cases, that's true. Helping others in a time of need knows no boundaries. It doesn't matter where somebody that needs help has come from, where they live, or what they look like. And it's simply why we come to work, to help others, to bring calm to a catastrophic situation, or to simply help somebody that's in need. On the other hand, we interact with people on the worst days of their lives. This could be a situation where your child has fallen and simply broken their arm, your house could be on fire, or your coworker may have fallen down from a heart attack. All of those situations are normal things in what we do. We've responded here in the city to all of those types of calls. We've performed CPR and brought people back when they've gone into cardiac arrest. We've removed people from heavy machinery that have been trapped for hours on end. All of those things happened this year. But the really important thing for us is that we know who the community is and what their needs are. This might be interacting with you or your family in the community, in the grocery store. It might be interacting with you at a community event. You never know where these interactions are going to come, but it's very important to us, and oftentimes more important than actually running the calls. It's understanding the public safety needs and interest of the community that is one of our key responsibilities. We recently experienced an earthquake and had a near miss with a hurricane. I know that Turkey has much more experience dealing with earthquakes than we do, and perhaps we should have called upon you all to help us with information during that time. Maybe we should have done that, and maybe we should reach out as we do planning for the next time that does happen. Preparation and response to these types of events are the responsibility of public safety agencies, and we want to make sure that we partner with all groups in the community to make sure that you have the information you need. You're extremely fortunate in this area to have the police and fire and the FBI that work together hand in hand every single day. One of the things that I enjoy the most in my position is being able to actually talk to the citizens. I get people to call me on the phone, and that helps to build these relationships. And I want to continue, as we've said before, to go forward and do that. We cherish these relationships, and I look forward to continuing that in the future. And again, I appreciate the ability to come here and talk with you and recognizing my staff that's here with me tonight. Thank you.
If I could kindly call upon Chief Rick Rappaport, Head of Fairfax Police. Chief.
Good evening, everyone. It's it's a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you for the invitation to join you. It's good to be among friends again. I've been asked to say a few words tonight about community engagement. And when we think about community engagement, I think two questions that should come to mind are, why should we engage and how should we engage? I think the first question is the easier of the two. I think we should engage because we're safer and we're stronger together than either of our communities can be separately. Working together gives us the best chance of success, of overcoming the obstacles to success, and the best chance of solving the problems that threaten our safety and our security and our welfare. On the eve of 9/11, it's easy to focus on terrorism as that threat, and with good reason, it is a very real threat. But terrorism is not the only thing that threatens our communities. So do dangerous drugs, school violence, hate crimes, and a lot of other really bad things, frankly. When bad things threaten, members of law enforcement and members of the community share a very deep desire to protect our community and eliminate the threat. Law enforcement brings enormous technical resources and human resources to the task, but we often lack the ability to focus those resources as narrowly as we would like to focus them. The community, on the other hand, brings an enormous amount of awareness and grassroots information to the task, but the community lacks the ability to independently determine what is a real threat and effectively neutralize the threat and therefore protect itself on its own. The case of the Washington area sniper in 2002, I think, is an excellent example. Many in the room probably lived through that situation, but over the course of 22 days, a sniper with a high-powered rifle indiscriminately shot 13 people in the Washington area, killing 10 of them. Thousands of law enforcement officers mobilized in the region, but frankly, we had very little information to work from. Millions of people were in fear of doing anything outside, but they were powerless to protect themselves. The conventional wisdom was that we were looking for a lone white male gunman. At one point, it was believed that the sniper may have been in a white van, and over the next couple of weeks, many innocent white men in white vans were stopped by the police and questioned to determine their possible involvement in the case. In the immediate aftermath of one shooting, law enforcement officers working together from a common tactical plan closed the entire interstate system from Richmond to almost to Baltimore and Prince William to Annapolis in a matter of just a few minutes. Tremendous resources, tremendously well organized. Our plan was to trap the sniper on the highway as they escaped from the most recent shooting. And then we hoped we could quickly find a witness to the shooting that would tell us what vehicle and what kind of suspect we were looking for. Unfortunately, we didn't find any witnesses to that particular shooting. We later learned that the snipers were in fact trapped on the interstate and had driven through one of our checkpoints. We easily recognized the threat, but we didn't recognize the attackers. It turned out later that the snipers were two black men in a blue sedan, not a lone white male in a white van. During that time, someone commented to me that it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. And I said, that's the right analogy, but it's the wrong scale. In fact, it was like looking for a needle in 10,000 haystacks. What we needed was for someone to just narrow it down to one haystack. Because if we could focus all of the resources that we had brought together on just one haystack, we could find that needle in no time. And that's exactly what happened. From thousands of citizens who were serving as our eyes and ears, who were phoning in hundreds of thousands of tips, one or two critical pieces of information focused us on John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo, and they were arrested within 48 hours of receiving that information. No one in this region has been shot by a sniper since then, and our community is safer as a result. We need to engage and we need to work together because we're safer and we're stronger together than either of us is separately. The second question I posed about community engagement is, how should we engage? And I think to effectively engage, we need to do three things. First, we need to focus on our commonalities rather than our differences. We share neighborhoods, we share schools, we share shopping places, we share recreational places. We all want safe neighborhoods, and we all want our families to be free from both the threat of violence and the fear of violence. We want our children to grow up to be responsible citizens who contribute to a strong world economy and a strong nation. We do have differences in culture and custom, but I think that should be a source of celebration and not fear. Second, we must work to establish personal trust as the foundation for institutional trust. Our institutions are hugely complex. They're full of well-intentioned and hardworking people trying to do the right thing, but there will always be the inevitable mistakes, oversights, misguided officials, and occasionally bad decisions. It's only through diligence and hard work that personal relationships flourish and real trust is built. And this is where our leadership of our respective organizations is critical. I think we have to model those trust relationships. I want Bilal and Farouk and Ahmed and Emre to know that if someone in the community brings them a concern or a problem, that they can pick up the phone and call me or my Deputy Chief Carl Pardini or Jim McJunkin or Chief Dave Rohr or anyone in my organization. And we will use our power and our influence as leaders to make our organizations responsive to that issue. And likewise, I hope that if there's a concern that I have that the Turkish American community can be of assistance with, that I can pick up the phone and I can call any one of them. And because of our personal relationship, they will use their power and their influence in the Turkish American community to be responsive to what our needs and our issues and concerns are. We will not trust each other as organizations until we have first trusted each other as individuals, recognizing that our intentions are honorable and our concerns are shared. Third, when we focus on our commonalities and we've established personal relationships, we can effectively focus on the common problems and our shared threats. We can bring our respective resources to the table and leverage them for our common good. In 2002, not every person in a white van was a sniper, but there was one sniper. In 2011, not every citizen of Arab descent is a terrorist. Not every person of Hispanic descent is an illegal immigrant. Not every person of Asian descent is a gang member. But there are dangerous people in our midst. Whether they're robbing banks, committing financial crimes, identity theft, or plotting terrorist attacks on innocent people. We need to put aside the common stereotypes and the false assumptions and focus our resources on real threats. Working together, we can eliminate those threats and make our communities safer. This event tonight is evidence to me that we are focused on common goals and we're serious about building trust relationships. That's real community engagement. I know I speak for my colleagues when I say that we're excited about the good things that come from that kind of an effort. Thank you for having us and for your recognition on this occasion.
Thank you, Chief Rappaport. In particular, not only is it an offer, but is a re-offer by the Chief as well as his counterparts in the other agencies to not only to request assistance, but to also seek our assistance. So I think this is very reassuring that the Chief of Police, and I know his counterparts in the other agencies, also stand with him in this regards, and we appreciate being valued in that regard. So thank you, Chief. I'd like to now call upon the FBI head of the Washington Field Office, Mr. James McJunkin.
Thank you, Emery, and thank you to the Turkish American community for inviting us all here tonight. I speak for all of my colleagues to say that this is a very important opportunity for us to get to know you. I was asked to speak tonight on the 9/11 attacks and how we would prevent the next one or another similar attack, and so that's what I'm going to focus a little bit on tonight. Now, 9/11 happened, as you know, almost 10 years ago. Next week we'll suffer through the 10th anniversary of a very tragic event in American history. And we all know that now, as we knew within the early days after the attack, that attack came to us as a result of the acts of a couple of madmen who studied the United States and identified vulnerabilities that were apparent to us based upon our freedoms. And that would be how they got on airplanes and how they came to the United States and how they secreted themselves within their similar communities, that the diaspora, as it were, here in the United States, until it was time for them to strike. And they didn't share that planning with anyone except for themselves. And when it was time to go, they all knew exactly where to go and when and how to pull off the attack. As you all know, 3,000 people, nearly 3,000 people perished that day. Many here in Washington D.C. area, as well as Pennsylvania and New York City. We in the FBI took a very, very high toll on us as well. We lost an agent in the Twin Towers who rushed in without having been invited there or having been sent there to help people escape from the buildings, and was actually crushed in the rubble when the building collapsed. So we have personal loss with regard to that attack, very, very close to home. Now, what happened after the attack was almost worse than what happened before the attack, and that is that we began to distrust one another. There were a lot of suspicions and false allegations brought against members of the Muslim community, particularly, as having been responsible for something like that. And it's almost hard to believe that in today, in 2001 even, that something like that, so a brush could so broadly paint a group wrongly. And we know, as we know, that the madmen that were responsible for that justified their actions in many different ways, but the reality is that it had nothing to do with what they did. So now we have the task before us is to not only rebuild what was destroyed and to try to rebuild the lives that were affected by that attack, but to try to patch together the relationships that we had before 9/11, and I think and have grown stronger since 9/11. So for us, the the real important piece of opportunities like this is to get to know, not only get to know the community, the Turkish community, by example, but the Pakistani community, the Somalian community, any other community that has a shared interest in making sure that the United States government is fair and equitable. They have the opportunity to, at least in the Washington, D.C. area, and I think I can speak for most of my colleagues around the FBI, the opportunity to have that community get to know the FBI. Because that's part of trust building. And it's for us to have transparency into the communities that we serve, but also to have the transparency for the communities for our organization as well. And so I think that as we're out here meeting and greeting and breaking bread together, that is a very good opportunity for you to ask questions of us. Now the threat, as we see it, is pretty simple. It's complex, but it's simple as it is. We've got 3 areas of the world that I think bring us the greatest amount of threat to the country, and that would be external attacks from foreign lands brought to us in the United States. And all 3 of those have one characteristic shared together, and that is they have governments that are either unwilling or unable to truly police what's going on in those areas. And so the external threat for us is people who are there who get caught up in that hate, and then who are trained and sent to the United States to pull off an attack, much like the 9/11 attacks. But we are better now at detecting who those people are, and when they arrive, vetting them to determine whether or not they're truly terrorists or not. And that's what the FBI does day in and day out all over the country. The other threat is a threat that's here in the United States, that's unseen to many, but is promulgated based on their access to hate speech or hate words that come to them through the internet or through written or spoken words that come from people who don't fully understand maybe what they're talking about, but who have formulated very strong opinions and who are pushing forward an agenda that may lead others, generally not themselves, but others, to take an act, to act out again in some, for some unknown or unclear purpose, and injure others. And so those are much more difficult for us to detect because we, despite what you might read in the newspaper, we don't have everyone's telephone tapped, and we are not reading everybody's email. That would be, Chief Rappaport mentioned that 10,000 stack of needles looking for a needle. For us, to read the world's email, we only have 11,000 FBI agents, so it really wouldn't, we would be consumed by that if it was actually true. So we are not in a position to provide that type of coverage, nor would we, because of our system of government here. And so what we do is we focus on those individuals who come to us through information or through their deeds, of people that are committing a crime. Not what they think or what they say, but who are actually taking specific acts towards the commission of a crime. And that is the same. Chief Rappaport will testify. Fairfax County Police Department is here. Those elements are the same in the federal government as they are in the local government. And we are in a position to investigate those who actually commit the crime, not think it, say it, or shout it. It's more of what they actually do that matters to us. So your opportunity, as I started at the beginning of when I started my presentation, I talked about the madmen that exploited vulnerabilities in the United States. And what I think that we've done since 9/11, and I think what I look forward to in the coming years, is to become more and more familiar with and open to groups like yourselves, and allow them to become more familiar with us. And I think in that we will reduce vulnerabilities that were exploited by the terrorists 10 years ago, and that will eliminate their ability to do it to us again. And I think that our relationships and comfort with one another is probably a very, very strong step in that process. So I thank you for inviting us here. I want to recognize Brenda Heck. Brenda, wave your hand over there. She's asleep almost because, number one, she hears me railing on all the time, so I bore her. And the other thing is she works very long hours. She's my special agent in charge of counterterrorism for the Washington, D.C. field office, and has a great deal of responsibility on her shoulders. So I want everybody to see Brenda and recognize her and get a chance to shake her hand as well. So, and that's it for for my speech, or my part of the speech. Thank you. Emery.
Thank you very much, James. Much appreciated. I'd like to now call upon Dr. Joshua Walker, who's Director of the Turkey Desk and a Fellow at the German Marshall Fund. Please.
I certainly don't feel like I should be sitting behind here after the two gentlemen we've seen and also all the heroes I see in front of me. So I want to honor each of you for your service and all you guys have done. But I also want to honor all of you in your room today. I know that I see a lot of Turkish friends in the back. Hoş bulduk. I just got back from Turkey a couple of weeks ago, so it was a great time to spend 2 months in your wonderful country. I was asked in a lot of ways to talk about 9/11, not just from the perspective of a personal reflection, but also on kind of how do we move forward. And I think it's really important. I think what we heard today is very encouraging, and I think that the officials we've heard from both the state and the local and also the federal have already put out there what makes America great. And I want to emphasize the 9/11 that I think of. And let me just, if you'll allow me, start with this small vignette. September 11th was a Tuesday, and I was not in this country. I actually was in a very foreign land, a place I'd never been to before, a country called Morocco. And I landed there at 8:30 in the morning, which would have been 1 a.m. in America. Nothing had happened that day. My mother had no idea where I was. I was studying abroad in Holland and Europe, and I decided to go with a very close Jewish American friend who was very devout, wore a Star of David, and was very overtly Jewish in a lot of ways. So we went to Morocco, which is a predominantly Muslim country. And on 9/11, we checked into our hotel at Casablanca, and we began to explore the markets. Anyone who's been to Casablanca, anybody who's been to Morocco, knows exactly what this place is like. It's bustling. It's much like the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul for our Turkish friends. And if any of you have not been there, I would highly encourage it. Around 3:30 that afternoon, everything changed. All of a sudden, everyone was glued to the TV, and we couldn't understand Arabic. We didn't know what was going on. But from that moment onward, every time we walked by, people would start pointing and asking questions. And finally, someone would have the courage, and they would come up, and in their broken English or French, they would say, "Where are you from?" Without even hesitating, "America." And they say, "Do you know what happened to your country?" And I said, "What happened to my country? What are you talking about?" And they took us over, and we saw on live television the second airplane hit the towers. And at that point in time, the only headline said, "America under attack." And anybody on this day as an American or any American, whether it's Turkish American, British American, Italian American, remembers exactly where they were. It's that feeling you get in your stomach that someone's just punched you, and you don't know what's happened. I lived in New York for 3 years. Many of my friends were there. People I knew were lost in that attack. And then to hear that there was another attack that had hit the Pentagon. And then to hear that another plane was on its way to the Capitol. The entire world seemed to be upside down. The King of Morocco declared a state of emergency immediately. Our bags, when we got back to the hotel, were put right outside very helpfully for us, and they asked us to leave. And they said all flights were canceled. So they asked us to leave, but we couldn't leave the country. And they said, "You need to contact the U.S. Embassy. You need to get help." Clearly, we were not going back to America. We were going back to Europe. So we began to wander. Not the smartest thing I've ever done in my life. As we wandered, people began to congregate and began to ask more questions. "You're American." Next thing we know, there's a large crowd of people who began to notice my friend's Jewish star. He said, "It's your fault. It's your fault you're under attack." Why is it his fault? The Jews brought this upon America. We don't know who did it. We don't know what happened, but it's your fault. And so the louder they screamed, then they began to be shuffling. So we began to get out of there. And we ran from the center of Casablanca with our bags as fast as we could to an area we had no idea where we were, into a slum area of Casablanca. And we found a small little soup kitchen. We sat down and we're having soup, trying to figure out what we were going to do. We couldn't get out. All the flights were canceled. We couldn't go back to America. We didn't really want to go to the embassy either because I'd worked in the State Department. I knew exactly what bureaucracy was all about. So I decided not to go that direction. Two men came in, full beards, wearing the entire Islamic outfit, having just come from prayers. They noticed us immediately, and they came straight up to us. And we thought, here we go again. We're going to be accused. I told my friend to cover the Jewish star, zip up, whatever it was. They sat down and greeted us. Salam alaikum. Alaikum salam. How are you? I had an entire conversation. And when they asked where we were from, I said, "Where do you think we're from?" "New Zealand." Sounds good to me. So for that moment, I was from New Zealand. I still shudder when I think about the fear that must have gripped me to not take on my American heritage that I'm so proud of. But at that moment, I was scared. My friend was deathly scared of what was going to happen. It turned out that Muhammad and Ibrahim came from a very upstanding family, but they had no money to their name. They ran a local mosque. They had just come from prayers. And as soon as they found the truth that we were American, the first thing they wanted to do was take us back to their home. They said, it's not safe here. You have to come back with us. So we went back with them that night. And into the house we went. There was one large room that was right next to the mosque where the father, who was the imam, or the preacher of the mosque, sat. And there were 30 family members that all lived in this one room. And it was the most amazing thing. There were Qurans everywhere. There was calligraphy everywhere. My father's a pastor, a Southern Baptist pastor, so religion's kind of my thing. I love talking about religion. I love talking about my faith, everything else. And we got into an amazing dialogue, and neither of us spoke the other's language. I didn't speak Arabic. They didn't really speak English all that well. But we could connect based on stories. So we were talking about Moses. We were talking about Adam. We were talking about Noah's Ark and all the commonalities and the similarities that we shared one another. And I had the most amazing couscous I've ever had in my entire life. It was succulent, it was delicious. And it became very clear that as it got later, that they were not going to let us leave. It wasn't kidnapping per se, but they said, look, it would be against our faith and our religion to let you go out. You are our guests. You will be our guests. We don't know what happened to your country, but it's in our tradition as true Muslims that we have to look after you. And so from that moment onward, we had an amazing experience. We stayed for 1 full week with this family. And I think in many ways, when I think about 9/11, the tragedy of that day and the lives that were lost are something that we will all mourn. But there is a positive side of that. And to me, the real story is about getting to know thy neighbor. And it's about being able to focus on our commonalities that we've already talked about. And to me, that story of kind of being able to think about all that fear that gripped us in that moment and all the shenanigans and all the things that were going on all around that world at that moment. And to think about in a tiny little hut in the middle of Casablanca, where my mother was terrified to learn I was, because she didn't know where I was for a good full week, and it was not the smartest thing I did to not contact my mother to let her know where I was on 9/11. But that feeling of being able to bring communities together and to be able to share in the true interfaith dialogue, not what 19 men said they were doing in the name of a God that they knew nothing about, because the God that they called to, that my friends there in Casablanca told me about, was not the same God that would do that to the Twin Towers, would do that to innocent civilians. And so to me, that launched me on a whole life's path. And to me, when I began to think about what I wanted to do with my life, it really began to focus on why is it there are people in the world who would do these types of things? And I'm not a terrorist specialist. I'm not a counter-terrorist specialist. I'm a human being. I happen to be an American. I happen to study a very important country in the world. It's called Turkey. It's one of the largest Muslim-majority nations in the world. And in many ways, when I think about what 9/11 signified, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, everyone became an American. The headlines in almost every country that I study, the next day's headline, including the French, remember the freedom fries, everything else, they put, we are all Americans. And for that moment, there was a unity around the world. Because everyone could unite in the evilness of the men, of what they had done. It didn't matter what creed they did it. And to me, it really didn't matter if they said they did it in the name of Jesus Christ or of, Joseph Smith, Muhammad, or Allah. They did not serve any type of God or any type of faith that I know of. And to me, thinking about that experience and thinking about how communities can come together, that to me is what 9/11 is. So when I think about 9/11, though I mourn the losses, I smile about the future, because to me, what 9/11 did was it made us realize that if we don't work together, these types of things will continue to happen. The country that I study now, Turkey, and also the country I come from, the United States, have been strong allies for the last 60 years. But we're entering probably one of the most difficult periods we've ever entered. And this has nothing to do with the people in this room. This has everything to do with politics and geopolitics. And I think sometimes it's easy when people have small differences to focus on those big differences and focus on the big leaders at the top and to say, well, there's nothing we can do about it. Heroes are those people that rushed into the Twin Towers. Heroes are the people that did things that I couldn't have found strength to do. But to me, a hero is somebody who actually does something within their power, that does the right thing in the moment. Anybody can be a hero. It's about where you live that legacy moving forward. And to me, when I think about what we in this room can do to prevent the hatred and the events of 9/11, it comes exactly to what we've heard from our officials. It's building that trust, person to person, between Turkish American communities and all the other communities that are here, to help explain that Islam is not a religion of hate. It is not a religion that Al-Qaeda or Taliban has a purview on. Islam is the way you live your life. Islam is a moral compass. It is the beautiful stories of the Quran. I've read the Quran 4 times now, and every time I read it, it brings tears to my eyes when I think about the poems and the way in which the scriptures are written. The scriptures are so similar, it's frightening sometimes, To think about all of us coming from Abrahamic traditions, whether you're Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, we share far more than anybody likes to think about. And when I hear an imam or a preacher or anybody else tell me that they have God's truth, they have God's word, it makes me very suspicious, because I have a direct connection to God, and all of our faith teaches us that, and that comes from within. And even on the political level, when I watch American politics, I get sick sometimes, particularly now as it gets closer to the presidential election, to see the way in which people will twist words and make different things out of it. And I think sometimes it's almost like a sport for human beings. It's easier to get angry about something. It's like a football team. Those of you from Turkey, I'm sure that you have your Fenerbahce fans, Beşiktaş fans, and Galatasaray fans. But at the end of the day, you all come together and support the Turkish national team at the World Cup. And in many ways, that's the way Americans are. We can have our small differences. We can support different teams here and there. But when it comes to the larger issues, we're all fundamentally the same. And when I think about what we can do towards the future, the first is education. The key to almost everything is education. And education is not just a passive learning. It's not just sitting in a room and listening to someone tell you about it. In the same way, sitting in your pew on a Sunday or sitting in a mosque on a Friday, listening to the imam or preacher preach to you. It's about taking those words and figuring out how they can be applied in your own life. And then it's putting those words into action. So it's hearing and saying, okay, there are people within my community that seem to have very different ideas. Who's going to set them straight? Does it have to be somebody in a uniform to set them straight? Most of the time, that's the last resort. If I'm not able to talk to my own Christian believer in the church that we're in the sanctuary, to have that discussion, then there's a problem. There's a breakdown of trust within my own community. And being able to take that education, being able to take that communication and that dialogue to a larger level is the key in many different ways. And one of the things that I mourn every time I come back to the United States is how individualistic we've become. It's almost unacceptable for me to greet someone else, to say hello. I'm from the South, and in the South, when you see somebody walking by, you say, how are you? In New York, when I say hello to somebody, they look at me like there's something wrong with me. What's it to you? Nothing. I just wanted to know how you were doing. And one of the things I love the most about Turkey, and I'm sad about every time I go to some of the big cities, is the level of hospitality. That level of hospitality that I experienced in Casablanca is not unique to Casablanca. You can find it right down the road. You can find it right here in Fairfax. You can find it in all different parts of Turkey. And that hospitality, that basic humanness, that need that we feel to connect with other people, to be able to share of our faith, share of our beliefs, share different process, share different ways of doing things. To me, that's the true lesson to take from 9/11, to think about the fact that the way to prevent the next 9/11 is to make sure that we're working together, so that even if there's a major tragedy that far surpasses anything that those terrorists tried to do on that day, that we're working together so that we're able to mourn each other's losses, because it's not just about what happened to that community. It's what's happened to our community. So whether it's Turkish Americans, Italian Americans, British Americans, wherever you come from, that we're all brought together. In many ways, we're tied together. We don't have much hope in many ways. We live in an interconnected world. You know, what happens in Turkey has direct implications here in the United States. I'm dealing with a fallout of what's happened recently between Israel and Turkey, and I can assure you there's going to be fallout here in D.C. as well. And I think the interesting thing is, as we approach the 10-year anniversary of 9/11, to not just never forget, but it's to always memorialize and to think about the people that lost their lives. Why did they lose those lives? What can we do to make their lives a living sacrifice in many ways? And to me, the way you do that is to remember them through your own actions and through your own words, and being able to love thy neighbor as thyself, because that's something that we all share together. So those are my words for today, and I just wanted to say thank you for giving me this wonderful opportunity to be able to share with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. As Joshua was speaking, as well as our distinguished guests as well, a few words came to mind. And if I could summarize, maybe, and of course, that would be difficult, but in one sentence, this comes to mind, a famous quote, that for evil to prosper, good men do nothing. For evil to prosper, it takes good men to do nothing. So this is very important in regards to the themes that were covered today, in terms of respect, in terms of trust. We have to be proactive in regards to those building of relationships, whether they're between organizations, but even more so for the long term between individuals. So this message, I would like to think, has a ripple effect that is taken beyond these walls into our lives and into the spheres of influence that we all have as individuals, that we all have as Americans. So I want to thank each one of our speakers. We have amongst us a very special guest or guests. We have the mother and father of Gevher Kamerdinova, who is of Turkish descent, who passed away on 9/11. If I could have the parents rise. If we can. They've joined us here today. And we have a very close friend of Gevher who will say a few words. I believe her name is Fatma Kanat. If I could please call Fatma to the front.
I can just say a few words about my friends. She was like almost like my sister, and I was with her and her last night on September 10. She was most wonderful person that I can meet ever, and we spent almost 1.5 years in New York together. All I can say, I'm very lucky to knowing her. She was really very nice person, and we lost her on September 11. She was working in the second tower on 98th floor. And I mean, it was very big loss for us. All I can say.
Of course, that's a very moot point to end on, but it is why we are here today, to recall and to remember those lives that were taken away, the close to 4,000 lives. So in remembering the important message that the representatives of these agencies, that Joshua, we need to, of course, take those words as motivation for us in remembering those that have passed away, and to do our utmost to continue the preventative work of that trust building, of friendship, of hopefully that concept of the ripple effect and taking this message elsewhere. I thank each and every one of you for coming tonight, and may these words be taken beyond these walls. Have a most pleasant evening. Thank you.